Is romantic leading man status, is that something you desire? I mean, you haven't necessarily done films that would take you to that level in the past.
It's certainly not something I set out for. I mean, the two films that I've sort of done which have been sort of romantic leads have been, you know, Romeo and Juliet and this, were simply chosen because they were, you know, the best possible films that I saw to do. It's certainly not, you know, something the direction I'm sort of going in. I think a lot of times if you know, specifically target a direction that you want to go in and don't sort of take chances. I mean, for me, doing roles like this was something completely different for me, especially being in a movie of this caliber. I've never done anything of this sort of size before, and it was amazing.
Yeah. Were you initially reluctant to take this role?
A little bit, just because I haven't been. I don't really like sort of these gigantic, huge films for some reason. They seem to be a lot more about the special effects and less about actually a story with content, you know. But I didn't want to discriminate against this movie just because it was huge, because it was a terrific script, you know. It was a great character, and an overall, you know, overall it had a lot of important things in a movie. So it was an interesting sort of thing. I, you know, took a chance and tried something different here, because traditionally I've sort of done smaller films.
Yeah. The love story between you and Kate Winslet's character is really what drives this film, and it works so tremendously well. And I want to ask you about working with Kate, but first I want to ask you, she got ill recently, London at the premiere. Were you there, and how
well, she was shooting in Morocco. She was doing another picture out there, and I think she got some sort of bug and had to go away for the night. I wish she was there, because there was a royal premiere out there, and we sat next to the prince and everything. It was pretty interesting, something new. But I mean, like, we went through so much on this movie. Kate and I were complete partners throughout the whole project and supported each other so much that, you know, I wish she was here for all this, but she'll be fine. She's going to get better soon.
Have you talked to her?
Yeah, I visited her a couple of times. She's already better. It was, I think, you know, a lot of work, and once you get something like that, it's rough.
Yeah. Did you connect with her immediately once you met? You know, did you two realize, you know what, this is going to be good. We're going to be great together.
I think we definitely initially said, oh wow, we respect each other's work, and we wanted to do, you know, were both big reasons why we wanted to do this picture, was to work with each other too. And you know, as soon as it became even deeper when we started doing the movie, because we definitely needed, you know, a shoulder to sort of lean on, and we were there for each other constantly. I mean, when you shoot a movie for up to 7 months, you need, and through all the stuff that we had to do in this movie, you need somebody to, you know, vent with. So we did a sort of a lot of all the complaining we needed to do, we did in the trailer, so we didn't need to bring it on set. But she was such a great partner and such a terrific person. Yeah. Really is. I mean, she's top notch. She's going to be one of the greats. She already is.
Yeah, stunning. Well, both of you is a great combination, definitely. Tell me about some of the difficult parts. I mean, first of all, well, there's so many first of alls, but you spend a lot of time in the water. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the tough parts?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much stuff to do in this movie. It truly was. I think the most challenging thing was, it almost had two phases. I mean, there's the whole sort of, the reason why I initially was fell in love with the movie was because of the whole relationship between the two characters. And there was sort of a phase where we sort of did that, then we moved on to the action-oriented sequences, which neither of us were used to at all. And it was almost like coming in every day with a new roller coaster to go on, some sort of new adventure to do. And it was cool the first couple times. You try it out, it's fun. I never felt like my life was in danger by any means. I mean, you get the occasional cuts and bruises, but you know, when you go to the 50th, 60th time doing the same thing, it gets a little tedious. But that's all part of filmmaking, you know, you gotta accept the good with the bad.
Zane told me he tried to come up with a storyline where maybe his character was aquaphobic and, you know, he could stay out of the water. You try anything like that yourself? Jack
didn't have much time to be aquaphobic in this movie, I don't think.
So there's a scene, I mean, there's so many scenes obviously when, you know, the ship is going down, but there's a scene in particular where you and Kate have to rush to the stern and you're clinging and the boat is tipping. How did you shoot some of that? I mean, how much did you two have to be involved in?
It was an interesting combination because a lot of it was, you know, I mean, there was an actual ship there that we that was on hydraulics that went up in the air. It was like amazing. You went out in this completely fabricated studio in Mexico, and there was a gigantic Titanic sitting there. It was like you know, a huge sight to behold. A lot of it was done in real life, surprisingly. You know, some of it was computerized. As far as like the end sequence, which is probably the most climactic, when the ship completely goes up and down in the water, that was a lot of that was done for real. I mean, I remember the day we were there. I mean, it was completely surreal. We had, you know, 20 guys on bungee cords below us, falling on top of each other and bouncing off girders, and then above us on a hydraulic poop deck while we were chained on. And then looking up, you see, you know, 20 cranes around you with lights, and then a Jim Cameron swooping down in an elevator crane to a close-up, passing you to a green screen. It's like, whew, unbelievable.
I'm making a big movie here.
Exactly.
Now, you said you never really felt endangered, but when you're doing some of these scenes and, you know, water's rising, you're, you know, up to your neck in water, did you kind of feel like you could imagine the horror the people actually went through?
Oh, absolutely. It was, I mean, you definitely got transported a lot of, I mean, the attention to detail, not only in the events that happened, but everything around you was, you know, to the T. Everything was completely done up exactly how it was. And when you have, you know, 1,000 screaming people around you rushing to a specific direction, your adrenaline gets going. But it was an interesting period. It was an interesting time, you know. And especially with the whole class struggle that went on during the Titanic was really fascinating, how a lot of the first-class passengers sort of were extremely arrogant in going out in all the lifeboats and left a lot of the third-class people to sort of sit there and survive on their own. It was a tragic story.
Yeah, very tragic. I mean, I learned a lot watching it. I didn't know a lot of that history
Me
myself.
either before I learned about the movie.
Yeah. Did you realize that James Cameron had this in him? Did you know his work, or what impressed you most about him as a director?
Well, I'd seen his work before, and it was I mean, I think this was something completely different than he's ever done before, for sure. I mean, he's done action pictures before, and I'd always noticed that in his films in the past, he always had, you know, the character development was always there in all of his movies. He paid a lot of attention to that, and I think more so in this movie than ever, you know, what the audience is connected to and attached to is these two people, you know what I mean? The sinking of the ship can be as dynamic as it wants to be, but in the end, that's what the audience is connected with and emotionally attached to and pretty much interested in. I mean, not to say that not to take anything away from the ship sinking, because it's amazing, but that's what I was attracted to about the film. And as far as Jim's concerned, I don't think anyone could have done this movie besides him. He, you know, he's completely passionate about what he does all the time and a perfectionist. And everyone around us doing the movie had to know that, you know, their focus needed to be on what was going on constantly. I mean, it's something you have to remind people of constantly doing a movie like this, because, you know, a lot of things can go wrong, and sometimes did. Yeah.
Do you realize, I mean, do you look at this film and realize this is going to be a part of history? I've made a history-making movie here.
Absolutely. I mean, the Titanic has a lot of sort of, it's a classic story. It's a real classic story in history. I mean, it has a lot to do with man's arrogance, you know, which is really interesting to me. It has a lot to do with man's, you know, blind faith that we're putting in technology. I mean, it was the Industrial Revolution at that time. Man was like kicking into full gear and making like the biggest ship in the world and making a proclamation to the world that they could, you know, build a ship that was unsinkable, that couldn't sink. And they sent it out to sea, and tragically it struck an iceberg and had tons of casualties because they were, you know, ignorant to what was out there. It's almost religious in a sense, you know, like the apocalypse or something. And it has a lot, and the whole thing that happened with the third and first class struggle, where, you know, first class passengers got a great chance at survival, and the third class had to sort of sit there and deal with their own fate. And it's got a lot of huge themes, and it's maintained its fame throughout these years because of that, I think. And also there's been such mystery about it, because nobody ever really knew what happened that night until recently, you know? So it's propelled as one of the great American tales, I think.